The government shutdown is threatening many services people depend on here at home.
Now Governor Roy Cooper is urging President Trump and Congress to end the partial government shutdown. WFMY News 2's Adoria Chumba is digging deeper into the impact here in the Piedmont Triad.
Take a look at this video. The Guilford Courthouse Military Park is closed off, just like many national parks across the country. A number of federal employees and programs are in limbo because of this government shutdown.
I'm not happy about it. It's a shame, and I hope that the government can work out what needs to be. No reason for this.
Like many, Jason English is worried about the shutdown. He just wanted to learn more about Greensboro's history, but couldn't because of this sign. The military park is closed.
The rangers and stuff can tell you the things that aren't on the plaques. The plaque can only hold so much information. I'm sure the visitor center has tons of information that I will not be able to get, unless I look it up myself.
It's not just national parks affected. Governor Roy Cooper says each day the federal shutdown continues, it delays long-term funds needed for Hurricane Florence recovery and threatens to hold up vital services for North Carolina families. Those services include temporary assistance for the needy, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and the Women, Infants, and Children Program.
We need less polarization and more. Where's the common ground? Let's find that.
Now, I talked with folks at the PTI airport today, and they say air traffic controllers are also affected by this shutdown, but they are still at the controls in Greensboro. The federal courthouse is also operating as scheduled.